Peace and love. Doing this for one of my good Moroccan partners that, he thinks he's Latino or Hispanic. And, he also comprehends the fact that he's Mexican. And, I'm explaining to him that, Mexico is on American soil or Moroccan soil. So I'm going to do a tie-in to help further illustrate that point. When you zoom in to the Mexican flag, you see a serpent. Let me see if I can just make this bigger. Zoom in a little better. So you see a serpent inside of, the bird, falcon, etc., right, in his mouth. Now, that principle stems from a culture called the Quetzalcoatls. And when we dig into the culture of the Quetzalcoatls, you'll see that these people are Egyptian, Olmec, Mayan, Aztec, etc. And that this concept, is on temples. They might show this snake, with wings, which is still, we're going to get into that. It's on ruins, in Yucatan, etc. So now let's go to the Quetzalcoatl so I can show you before I go into the demonstration what it looked like, right? Quetzalcoatl, right? Images. So the Quetzalcoatl is this, serpent and the bird, or they'll show the serpent with wings, as if, right, it's a bird. Or you see, that's a serpent. In most temples or whatnot, you'll see that with the wings. They've come up with many ways to express this, satire, etc. So you see, you get the point. It's dealing with, different expressions of the serpent. And you see some have wings. It's a serpent with wings, symbolizing the bird as well, like we saw in the Mexican flag. So now you see the origin, Give y'all a couple more so y'all get the point, because these visuals will help. You see the serpent right there coming out the, still part of the ruins. These temple structures, that's the serpent, right? And I found this pretty fascinating right here. It's another depiction of the Quetzalcoatl. So you see the snake right here once again, but this is a deity now. Later in the game, they changed it to worship him as if this character was Christ or something. But we know it's, that's the dogma, the throw off. But notice the imperial colors of the red and green, right, in the animation. The same red and green, imperial colors. So I wanted to throw that in there. I won't, blow your mind that hard. Let me get back. So now that I've drawn that parallel, we got to jump back into this. It's a must, So now that we got some background, right? I laid some foundation. This will make further sense. No definition can embrace Quetzalcoatl. He had several representation or aspects. He was the feathered serpent king and rainmaker god in Central America. Quetzal, bird or plume, and Quoto, serpent, signified a connection between bird and snake. The snake was supposed to be a kind of evil dragon guarding the well of life. We contained or imprisoned the life-giving moisture. An internal conflict existed between him and the great bird, who nested in the tree of life and would wrestle with and devour the snake, thus releasing the rains, the fertilizing waters necessary for men and crops. All right. Let me get this a little clear. The origin of this serpent-devouring bird lies in Africa. The plum serpent myth and all its highly arbitrary attractions and interconnections, such as the winged disc motif, evolved through ancient Egypt's contact with Black Africa, and because of special political circumstances in the Egyptian dynasties, or Egyptian dynastic period. Don Mackenzie, in his book Myths of Pre-Columbian America, has shown how this happened. He has demonstrated what very real circumstances in Africa and in Egypt had led to the very abstract relationships between birds and serpents. The bird and serpent were incorporated at an early period into the mythology of the ancient Egyptians, but Africa provided the concrete stage for what was later to become a mythical combat between bird and serpent. There is only one bird in the world, Mackenzie points out, that is persistent and successful hunter of serpents. Let me run that back. There is only one bird in the world, Mackenzie points out, that is a persistent and successful hunter of serpents. This is the well-known secretary bird of Africa. In general appearance, writes a naturalist, it looks like a modified eagle mounted on stilts and may exceed 4 feet in height. It is heavy and powerful, with webbed feet and sharp talons. The naturalist Verax gives the following description of the bird and of its method of attacking snakes. As nature exhibits foresight in all she does, she has given to each animal its means of preservation. Thus, the secretary bird has been modeled on a plan appropriate to its mode of life, and it is therefore, for this purpose, owing to the length of the legs and tarsi, its piercing eyes is able to discover at a long distance the prey, which, in anticipation of its appearance, is stretched on to the sand or among the thick grass. The elegant and majestic form of the bird becomes even more gracious. It now brings into action all its cunning in order to surprise the snake, which it is going to attack. Therefore, it approaches with the greatest caution. The elevation of the feathers of the neck and the back of the head shows when the moment for the attack has arrived. It throws itself into such force on the reptile that very often the latter does not survive the first blow. Right, so That's the actual depiction. A person named Mackenzie. He's trying to make logical sense of, okay, what bird attacks the serpent? So he's going into, the African secretary bird and the characteristics of that. That's what we just read. To avoid being bitten, if the first attack is not successful, the bird uses its wings as a kind of shield, flapping them vigorously. Its powerful feet are the chief weapons of offense. No other bird has been so equipped by the nature for battling with snakes. Eagles and falcons have powerful talons and beaks, but they do not possess the long legs of the secretary bird, which are absolutely necessary to ensure success when a serpent is attacked. Stories regarding this strange African bird were prevalent in an ancient Egypt. Stories regarding this strange African bird were prevalent in ancient Egypt. The priests and seamen who visited Punt in what is now known Somaliland became familiar with its habits. Mackenzie shows how the secretary bird of Africa suggested that the form of the Egyptian myths of Horus, in which the god, as the falcon hawk, attacks the serpent form of Set, the slayer of Osiris. The Set serpent took refuge in a hole in the ground, and above this hole was set a pole surmounted by the falcon head of Horus. See the connection? In the winged disc symbol of the sun god in ancient Egypt, we may trace the influence of stories about the secretary bird brought from Africa as the winged disc. The god Horus pursues Set and his companions in their various forms, including their serpent forms. This winged disc symbol is made up of the religious symbols of Lower and Upper Egypt. Once again, this winged disc symbol is made up of the religious symbols of Lower and Upper Egypt, since these two divisions of ancient Egypt came to be joined through conquest. The winged disc became a political symbol of unity in the Nile Valley, representing the merger of the two parts. The disc represents the sun. The wings are those of the falcon god Horus, the chief deity of the dynastic Egyptians, who united Upper and Lower Egypt by conquest. The two serpents that entwine the disc and extend their bodies above the wings are the serpent goddesses of the two ancient divisions of Egypt, namely Nekhbit and Uazit, known by the Greeks as Buto. Occasionally, these serpents were crowned with the diadems of Upper and Lower Egypt. The bird and serpent motif in the winged disc symbol traveled in ancient times to America. I'm going to run that back. The bird and serpent motif in the winged disc symbol traveled in ancient times to America. We find not clear evidence of the Egyptian prototype in the winged disc of ancient Mexico and Polynesia, but we find it used in the same way. The ancient Egyptians placed the image of the winged disc over the entrances of the inner chambers of a temple, as well as over its gates and other objects. Sometimes the symbol, the winged disc without the serpent. In the pre-Columbian America, the winged disc was placed on temple door lintels as in Egypt. Once again, in pre-Columbian America, the winged disc was placed on temple door lintels as in Egypt. The Polynesian form of the winged disc is of special interest because it shows the disc, the head of the bird-devouring serpent, the secretary bird of Africa, with which seafarers have become familiar. Professor Elliot Smith has shown how Egyptians influenced symbolic gateways in Asia. The winged disk of Egypt on the gates represent the means of communication between the living and the dead, and symbolically the portal by which the dead acquired a rebirth into a new form of existence. The megalithic gateway of the sun at Tiahuanaco in South America is one of several American gateways distinguished by the Egyptian winged disc symbol. It not only carries this symbol over the gate, but a frieze depicting three arrows of birdmen attendants. The origin of birdmen and of gods with bird heads in Black Africa and their later diffusion of Hellenistic Egypt will be discussed when we come to deal with Negro African influence on ancient Egypt and the Negro and Egyptian influence on the Olmec heartland. See chapters 7, 8, and 9. But now, let us return from the ancient symbols of Quetzalcoatl to Quetzalcoatl as man in the medieval Mexican world. The name was given to the native son of an American king, Mixcoatl, as well as a number of extraordinary figures or cultural innovators from outside, at least one of whom appeared on the eastern Atlantic seaboard with a fleet of boats and after an intermittent stay set out again on the Atlantic with the intention of returning home. Quetzalcoatl was also the name given as a honorific title to two high priests of Tenochtitlan in Mexico in memory of the god of civilization and learning. The archetype of the priestly idea. Tenochtitlan was founded by the Aztecs in 1325, and the decision to found a city in that place was based upon a legendary battle between the eagle and the serpent there. The confusion between the native Mexican, son of Mexicotl, and the alien figure appearing on the eastern seaboard has presented historical problems, but certain facts are now clear. The Quetzalcoatl, who came from outside, was reputed to have landed in America in a company of boats. And was a tall bearded man. He was clad in long white garments, probably carried a royal compass or royal mace or ball of some kind in his hands, and wore a turban. Anybody not familiar with that? It's a lot of ancient paintings, even on the Christendom side, and on pictures like a Mansa Musa. You'll notice they have like a gold, ball in their hand, or a purse, or something like that. Those were, transceivers. The cities of Moorish towns, they were controlled by EMF force, and whoever was the ruler or the head of the government would have control of, controlling the electricity throughout the whole town, based on using EMF. So it wasn't really like coal for fireplaces. We had copper lining, and we know how to dictate, water and different elements to create EMF or electricity. Just wanted to bring that up. And the brother he's talking about right now, whoever hasn't read this book, it's a brother named Abu Bakari, and he was the emperor of the Mali Empire. They'll talk about him later in this book, but that's who they'll, later in the game, create a dogmatic version of this, and they're making them like Jesus Christ. This, this Quetzalcoatl figure, they're making him like he's Christ, but that was simply Abu Bakari. He had left the Mali Empire and came over here in the 13th century, and it wasn't just him, it was a fleet, and that crew became the Aztecs later in the game. I just wanted to throw that in there, just in case I don't cover that in this book. Y'all can cross-reference that. So once again, he was clad in long white garments, probably carried a royal mace or ball of some kind in his hands, and wore a turban, conical crown, or similar headdress. So we're talking about turbans. You know what I'm saying? Let's use common sense. We're talking about turbans. Let me carry on. The main source of confusion over his appearance has been the use of the word white in some oral traditions. This word has been completely misinterpreted by many scholars and has led to the most fanciful notions that it was a European who innovated civilization and religious reform in America. The myth and ritual, the patterns of religious expressions in America differ sharply from those of Europe. The Catholic friars finding the cross in America, the cross is also found in pre-Christian Africa and had nothing to do there with Christ, because we know the cross, the 4 points, the 4 seasons, the 4, cardinal points, you know what I'm saying? We know what that really stands for. And here this author is saying the same thing. Let me carry on. Pronounced of the phrase white bearded figure and claimed that Quetzalcoatl was St. Thomas or St. Burton. See what they try to do to him? In 1949, PM Hansen. In 1949, PM Hansen even made claims for Quetzalcoatl as a reincarnated Jesus Christ. See, as Basil Hendrick points out, the Quetzalcoatl of the Mexican Valley documents was never blonde or fair, as stated by the friars, the Catholic friars, right? As stated by them. So these Catholic friars blatantly lied. But virtually always pictured as black bearded and in illustrations had his face painted black. The truth is, white is a purely convention when used as an exclusive referent for skin color and race. White, in American Indian terms, did not mean, right, in pre-Columbian times, did not mean Caucasian. Once again, the truth is, white is a purely European convention when used as an exclusive referent for skin color and race. White, as referred to as in a sense of American Indian terms, did not mean Caucasian, right? So back to, the studied Moors already know what it is. White is a political status. White does not mean Caucasian race. Look that up. Henry Campbell's Black Law Dictionary, 4th edition. Look up free white person. This is another cross-reference to further validate, just being studious. This is not a shock. There's no such thing as white in a sense of a race of people. No such thing as black in the sense of a race of people. That's a status. And when you look up in law what white means, the people of the land are considered white. The Al-Moroccans, or if you want to, say it in English, the Americans, the Aboriginal people of North, Central, and South America are status of white. Black is a status of servitude, aka minority, aka chattel property. So I just wanted to break that down. Peace and love. Hopefully this drew a connection, on how when you saying, you Latino or etc., right? And you identify with the Mexican flag, just know that goes back, right? Because if you're saying the Mexican flag, like we covered in the beginning, we're talking about that serpent, right? And we're talking about that bird, because that's what's in the center of the flag, ain't it? That's in the, right? We just covered that. We just covered that. So Just one more time for, I guess, dramatic effect. Right? You got the bird and the serpent. Whenever you got that popping off, you're dealing with what we just read, which is Egyptian culture, Moorish culture, right? I showed you the color scheme earlier of a lot of the Quetzalcoatl deities. They had the same color scheme, whenever they're showing the depictions of the Quetzalcoatl, you know. But peace and love, Islam.